That night transformed everything in unforeseen ways. The situation commenced with a straightforward request from my stepmother Jessica, urging me to remain at home while my father embarked on his customary fishing expedition. At that time, it seemed customary, as it was merely the two of us on most weekends. However, I was unaware that this evening would transcend the mundane, challenging the boundaries of our connection and indelibly impacting me. Please subscribe to my channel to enable me to share more captivating factual stories like this one. Ensure you view this video in its entirety, as the narrative will be exceptionally captivating. The residents appeared remarkably silent that morning. The absence of my father's typical presence rendered the silence peculiar. I had just completed my homework and was prepared to unwind when Jessica summoned me to the living room. "Could you assist me with a matter?" Her speech was gentle, nearly overly nonchalant. Her anxiety was evident, although the cause eluded me. I paused momentarily. "Certainly. What do you require?" I inquired, approaching her seated position. Jessica typically had a tranquil disposition, although today an unusual sensation prevailed. She smiled, yet the intensity in her eyes caused my heart to beat. "Please take a seat," she remarked, gesturing to the cushion beside her. I complied with her request, uncertain of the forthcoming events. Although intrigued by the unfolding situation, Jessica reclined, crossed her legs, and gazing me with an intensity I had not previously observed. She remarked that "you have matured significantly." Her tone was buoyant, yet the words carried a weight of implicit significance. "You are no longer the little lad I once knew." My heart momentarily halted. This was uncharacteristic of her. Our friendship had consistently been amicable and informal, although now felt perilous. I murmured, uncertain of how to reply. She inclined her body slightly, maintaining unwavering eye contact with me. "Indeed," she persisted, "you have transformed, and I believe we are both aware of it." Her utterance elicited a shudder along my spine. An unusual tension permeated the room, and I was uncertain how to alleviate it. "Jessica, what is your message?" I inquired, ultimately compelling the question to emerge. I sought to comprehend the situation, questioning why the atmosphere was laden with unarticulated sentiments. She paused momentarily before responding. She gazed at me, probing my eyes for the appropriate words. She exhaled deeply, rose to her feet, and approached the window. Her voice was subdued when she remarked that your father had departed for the weekend. Her gaze fixed on the yard. "Only the two of us are present." I acquiesced, uncertain of the direction of this dialogue, yet sensing a constriction in my abdomen. She pivoted to confront me, her countenance inscrutable. She continued, her voice calm yet gentle. "I have been contemplating. I have matters I wish to discuss with you. Matters I have lacked the guts to express until this moment." I gulped audibly. "Such as what?" She approached, her gaze fixed upon mine. She stated plainly, "Like us." The term lingered in the atmosphere, and my heart accelerated. What was her implication? This was illogical. I attempted to dismiss it with laughter, although my voice emerged unsteady. "What do you signify by US?" Jessica offered a subtle, knowing smile that caused my stomach to flutter. "You've observed it as well, correct?" she inquired, her voice subdued. The transformation in our relationship, We have transcended the roles of stepmother and stepson. My mind was racing, attempting to comprehend her words. However, I was acutely aware of the subject to which she was referring. I too experienced the subtle glances and lingering touches, although I consistently dismissed such emotions, believing they were not genuine. I am uncertain regarding your statement, I fabricated my response, my voice scarcely audible. She advanced further, her presence dominating, and now the room seemed excessively confined. Indeed. You do, she remarked gently, her fingers grazing my arm delicately. You experienced it as well. I rose suddenly, distancing myself from her in an attempt to gather my thoughts. Jessica, this is absurd, I stated, my voice quavering. You are my stepmother. We are unable to, and we ought not to. However, she remained resolute. She trailed behind me, reducing the space between us once more. Why not? She murmured, her eyes ablaze with fire. As adults, we are not obligated to adhere to the regulations set by others. I shook my head, attempting to fight the allure that was dragging me nearer to her. No, this is incorrect, I asserted, although even as I uttered the words, I sensed my will faltering. However, she retorted, extending her hand to caress my cheek. The contact electrified me, momentarily rendering me immobile, ensnared in the intricate web she was constructing around us. I desired to refuse, to distance myself from her, to flee the room and erase this occurrence from memory. However, I was unable to do so. Something immobilized me, and I despised myself for it. I was unable to dispel the sensation that circumstances were deteriorating uncontrollably. The tension within the household became intolerable. Each encounter with Jessica intensified the unspoken tension between us, overwhelming me. However, I was uncertain how to address it or halt the gradual, unavoidable descent into peril. The days merged indistinctly. Each interaction appeared fraught, as if we were treading on a razor's edge. I endeavored to maintain my distance, minimizing alone interactions with her. However, it became challenging. She consistently managed to be near, to assert her presence, whether through a casual touch on the arm or her gaze directed at me from across the room. This persistent tension remained ever present. Subsequently, the night arrived when everything transformed. My father was working late, and I was attempting to remain alone in my room, believing that if I evaded her long enough, circumstances would revert to normalcy. However, I was acutely aware that such an outcome was improbable. I could perceive her activity downstairs, accompanied by the faint sound of the television. The clock on my wall ticked audibly, each second prolonging the passage of time, complicating the evasion of reality. I contemplated contacting a buddy and fabricating an excuse to depart. However, something restrained me from dialing the phone. I stood outside my room, attuned to the silence enveloping the home. The silence was profound, and in that moment, I resolved to make a decision that would alter the course of everything. I down the stairs, each step increasingly burdensome. Jessica sat on the couch, a glass of wine in hand, her look remote as she fixed her eyes on the television. She initially failed to see me, or perhaps she did but feigned ignorance. I paused at the base of the steps, uncertain of how to proceed. However, she raised her gaze, her eyes locking with mine. And I realized there was no possibility of retreat. Unable to sleep, she inquired, her tone gentle, somewhat nonchalant. Her manner of expression elicited a rapid increase in my pulse, reminiscent of that initial day. Indeed, I murmured, lacking the confidence to articulate anything further. I approached the couch and seated myself, maximizing the distance between us. Despite the distance, the tension remained palpable and unarticulated. We were silent for some moments, the sole sound being the subdued hum of the television. I sensed her gaze upon me, her eyes fixating in a manner that caused a tingling sensation on my skin. I was uncertain how to disrupt the silence without exacerbating the situation. However, before to my opportunity to respond, she said once more. She softly remarked, "I have been contemplating our relationship," her voice just above a whisper. My heart raced momentarily. "Jessica, we are unable to," I began. But she interrupted me before I could complete my statement. "Why not?" she inquired, turning to face me completely. "Why are we feigning ignorance of the connection between us while we are both aware of its existence?" Her remarks impacted me profoundly. I intended to dispute her, asserting that she was mistaken and that we should not pursue this course. However, the reality was that I lacked the fortitude to resist any longer. I had also experienced the peculiar attraction between us that had intensified. I attempted to dismiss it, persuading myself it was not genuine. However, in this moment with her, I could no longer refute it. I asserted that we cannot proceed. Yet my tone was devoid of certainty. While I spoke, I was aware that these were falsehoods. She inclined nearer, her hand positioned on the cushion separating us. "We are not engaging in any wrongdoing," she murmured, her tone subdued and fervent. "We are not causing harm to anyone." I shook my head, attempting to dispel the haze that enveloped my thoughts. However, I contended feebly that it was unjust. She extended her hand and placed it on mine, her contact eliciting a surge of energy within me. "Who determines what is right and what is wrong?" she inquired, her stare fixed upon mine. I gulped, my heart pounding. I desired to withdraw and instruct her to cease. Yet I was unable to do so. I was immobilized, ensnared by the instant and the emotions I had long repressed. "We need not adhere to anyone else's regulations," she murmured, her fingertips delineating designs on the back of my hand. "We can determine for ourselves what is correct." I shut my eyes, attempting to suppress her voice and the sensation of her touch. But it proved futile. The barriers I had constructed around me were disintegrating, and I was uncertain how to halt the process. Before I could respond or muster the resolve to withdraw, she came in closer, her lips grazing my ear as she said, "Tell me you do not feel it as well." Her words elicited a shiver along my spine, and I despised the extent to which my body reacted to her, the intensity of my desire to acquiesce. I attempted to voice my objections, to articulate that this was erroneous and that we could not proceed. Yet no words emerged. Instead, I turned to confront her, my breath halting in my throat as our gazes met. The time prolonged, the tension between us intensifying with each second. And then, impulsively, I leaned in and kissed her. The initial kiss was gentle and hesitant, as if we were both gauging the situation. uncertain of the forthcoming developments. However, it swiftly intensified, the passion between us escalating as we surrendered to the long-simmering yearning. My hands grasped her waist, drawing her nearer as her fingers entwined in my hair. The surrounding world appeared to vanish, leaving only the two of us immersed in the moment's intensity. I recognized the wrongdoing and understood that we were transgressing an irrevocable boundary. Yet I was unable to desist. I was reluctant to cease. As the kiss intensified, my mind surged with numerous contradictory thoughts. I recognized the perilous nature of our actions and understood we were engaging in a risky endeavor, but a portion of me remained indifferent. Having desired this for a duration I was reluctant to acknowledge. Upon eventually separating, we were both panting, our faces mere inches away. Her eyes were dark, imbued with an indefinable emotion, and I realized that our relationship would irrevocably change. She whispered, her breath warm against my skin. I have desired this for an extended period, and I am aware that you have as well. I refrained from responding. I was unable to. The reality was too burdensome for me to endure. I merely nodded, my heart racing as the gravity of our recent actions enveloped me. Nevertheless, I was aware that it was not concluded. The kiss was merely the commencement. There was additional information. There will perpetually be an abundance. Subsequent to that evening, the dynamics of our relationship transformed. I could no longer perceive Jessica in the same manner. Each time our gazes intersected, I experienced a surge of warmth, a recollection of our past actions, and the implicit assurance of potential future encounters. The atmosphere in the house appeared imbued with a perilous tension, an awareness we both recognized yet refrained from confronting directly. Days elapsed in strained, uncomfortable stillness. I maintained my distance as much as possible. However, it was unavoidable to evade her entirely. Each touch of her hand and every fleeting glance resembled a spark poised to ignite the underlying tension. I saw that the situation was improper. Yet an undeniable attraction existed between us that I could not dismiss. Regardless of my efforts, one afternoon, while my father was off once more, the silence within the home became intolerable. I paced the living room, attempting to divert my attention with the television, although my mind continually reverted to her. The recollection of that kiss, the sensation of her lips against mine, the manner in which my heart had accelerated. The situation was overwhelming. I despised myself for contemplating it. Yet I was unable to desist. As I neared the brink of insanity, I perceived her footsteps approaching from behind. I glanced to find Jessica positioned at the doorway, her countenance inscrutable. For a little interval, neither of us uttered a word. The tension between us was palpable, laden with unexpressed sentiments. We must converse, she stated at last, her tone subdued, even uncertain. I acquiesced, recognizing that this discussion was unavoidable, despite my unpreparedness. Indeed, I concurred. My throat constricted. We possess. She approached the couch and seated down with a sigh. I sat across from her, maintaining a deliberate distance. My heart raced within my chest, and I struggled to meet her gaze. I was uncertain about how to begin and what to articulate that might improve the situation. She commenced, her hands clasped in her lap, acknowledging the changes and expressing her desire for you to feel at ease. That is the least desirable outcome for me. I swallowed with difficulty. My mouth parched. I am uncertain of my emotions, I said, my voice scarcely audible. This is not typical. Correct? We are not meant to experience these emotions. Jessica gazed at her hand, her demeanor concerned. I understand, she stated gently. But it is not an issue we can simply overlook. Is it? I lacked a response for her. The reality was that I was uncertain about our expected actions. Everything seemed amiss. Yet, concurrently, a part of me was reluctant for it to cease. I was unable to articulate or rationalize it. Yet the emotions were present, indisputable and genuine. She adjusted her position on the couch, inclining forward slightly. She revealed, her voice little above a whisper, that she frequently reflects on that night. I am unable to cease contemplating it. My breath was constricted in my throat. I wished to convey to her that I had contemplated it as well, that it pervaded my every waking moment. Yet I could not summon the courage to articulate the sentiment. I merely nodded, my heart pumping. A prolonged stillness enveloped us, laden with the significance of unspoken thoughts. I sensed the tension escalating once more. The identical perilous attraction that had initially guided us down this trajectory. Subsequently, before I could restrain myself, I stated, I contemplated as well. The words escaped my lips before I could retract them. And once articulated, they were irrevocable. Jessica's gaze met mine. And in that instant, I realized there was no turning back. We had transgressed a boundary. And now we found ourselves on the brink of something even more perilous. Initially, she remained silent. However, the expression in her eyes conveyed all the information I required. There existed a fervor, a necessity that reflected my own, which instilled fear within me. Simultaneously, it exhilarated me in an undeniable manner. We cannot continue this, I stated, my voice trembling. Although even as I articulated it, I was uncertain of my conviction. Jessica's eyes remained fixed on me. I am aware, she murmured. But we are already present. Are we not? The place appeared excessively confined. The atmosphere overly dense. I desired to flee, to maximize the distance between us. Yet I was unable to move. I was ensnared not by her, but by my own aspirations. The attraction between us was excessively powerful and irresistible. Before I comprehended the situation, she leaned in, her face mere inches from mine. I sensed her warm, gentle breath against my skin, causing my heart to race in my chest. For an instant, I believed I could halt it, withdraw, and conclude this before it progressed further. However, her lips met mine, and all logical reasoning vanished. The kiss was distinct this time. It was not timid nor uncertain, it was imbued with the tension we had repressed and the longing that had accumulated over time. I reciprocated the kiss instinctively, my hands positioned on the couch, clutching the fabric to maintain my composure. It wasn't about love or affection. It was about need, a raw, burning hunger that neither of us could manage. My heart raced, and my mind was a tumult of incomprehensible thoughts. At this time, I realized there was no possibility of retreat. Upon eventually separating, we were both breathless, our foreheads touching. The gravity of our recent actions lingered palpably. Yet none of us made an effort to disrupt the silence. "We have to stop," I urged again, though my voice was weak, lacking confidence. Jessica acquiesced, her breath warm across my skin. "I understand," she murmured. "But it is exceedingly difficult." "Is it not?" I refrained from responding. There was nothing left to say. We were ensnared in the intricate web we had created. And despite our assertions that we needed to cease, the gravitational force between us continually drew us nearer. Culminating in that moment, she inclined towards me once more, and we were unable to resist. It all happened so quickly, and as amazing as it was for me, she didn't seem to care. Upon its conclusion, she grinned at me, indicating her considerable enjoyment. The subsequent days elapsed in a haze. We tried to act normal, tried to pretend that nothing had happened. But the tension between us was unmistakable. Every time I saw her, I felt that same surge of heat, that same dangerous attraction. It seemed like we were circling each other, waiting for the moment when we would finally give in again. And I knew it was only a matter of time. One evening, when my dad was out late for business, I found myself in the kitchen, trying to divert myself by making supper. But the silence in the house was deafening, and I couldn't focus. Every sound seemed to echo, reminding me of the weight of what we were doing. I didn't hear her walk in at first, but when I turned around, there she was, leaning against the doorframe, watching me with that same unreadable expression. "Need any help?" she questioned, her voice calm. But there was something beneath it that made my pulse quicken. "No. I'm good," I answered. But my hands were shaking. She walked over to me, standing too near, her presence overwhelming. "Are you sure?" I swallowed hard, attempting to stabilize myself. "Jessica, we can't," I started. But she stopped me off. "We don't have to do anything," she whispered quietly, her eyes focused on mine. "But I think we both know where this is headed." The words sat between us, heavy and final. I wanted to protest, wanted to tell her she was wrong. But I couldn't because deep down, I knew she was right. We remained there in silence, the space between us diminishing with every passing second. And then, before I realized it, she was kissing me again. It was fast, almost fleeting, but it was enough to spark everything we had been trying to hold back. My heart pounded in my chest, and I knew that this was only the beginning. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of stolen moments and fleeting glances. It was like living in two separate worlds. One where everything seemed normal, and another where Jessica and I were constantly on the cusp of something we couldn't control. The weight of our secret was heavy, but we couldn't stay away from each other. No matter how much I told myself it needed to end, that we needed to stop, it kept happening. Every time my dad left for work or stayed out late, the animosity between us rose. I'd find myself in the same room as her, and without saying a word, we'd both know what was coming next. It was alarming how easily we had slipped into this. Every touch, every look seemed like we were crossing some invisible line. Yet it was never enough to make one of us pull back. Instead, we were drawn closer together, as if something more than both of us was directing us along this path. One Saturday afternoon, the air in the house felt exceptionally dense. My dad was at a corporate event and wouldn't be back till late. I could feel the shift the moment I woke up that morning. The silent expectancy that had become all too familiar. As the hours passed by, I couldn't escape the feeling that something was about to happen. Something we wouldn't be able to come back from. Jessica was in the kitchen when I stepped in, washing dishes with her back to me. But she must have known I was there since she didn't flinch when I entered. I waited by the door, watching her for a time, unsure of what to say or do. This bizarre dance we were caught in had become normal, and I knew the moves all too well. She turned off the faucet and cleaned her hands on a towel before approaching me. For a second, neither of us spoke. The silence was loud, packed with everything we weren't saying. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice gentle, her eyes probing mine. I wasn't. I hadn't been for a while. But how could I admit that? How could I convey the storm raging inside me? The continual conflict between right and wrong? I don't know. I finally responded, my voice scarcely audible. Jessica went toward me, stopping just a few feet away. "I've been thinking," she began, her words quiet and thoughtful. "Maybe we should discuss about what's been happening." I tensed, not sure I wanted to have this conversation. What was there to say that hadn't already been spoken with our actions? But she wasn't backing down, and I knew I couldn't ignore it forever. "What's there to talk about?" I asked, my heart racing. She sighed, massaging her forehead with the back of her hand. "I don't know. Maybe we need to figure out where this is headed. We can't keep living like this, pretending it's not happening." She was right, but I didn't want to hear it. "Where do you think it's going?" I asked, my voice rougher than I wanted. Jessica trembled slightly but didn't break eye contact. "I don't know," she conceded. "But I do know that we can't keep tiptoeing around it." I ran a hand through my hair, rage building inside me. "What do you want from me?" I snapped. Not because I was upset with her, but because I didn't have the answers either. "Do you want me to say this is okay? That I'm fine with it?" Because I'm not. I'm not fine with any of this. Her expression softened and she stepped forward, narrowing the distance between us. "I don't want you to be fine with it," she added quietly. "I simply want you to be honest with yourself. With me." Her words hit me like a blow to the belly, since I understood exactly what she meant. I had been lying to myself for so long, convinced myself that this was simply a phase that it would stop if we ignored it long enough. But the reality was, I couldn't stop thinking about her. I couldn't stop desiring her. And the more I tried to fight it, the stronger it became. "I don't know how to do that," I admitted, my voice breaking. "I don't know how to be honest about this." Jessica put out her hand, resting gently on my arm. The contact sent a chill down my spine, and I hated how much I desired it. "It's okay," she whispered, her eyes brimming with compassion. "We'll sort it out together." The honesty in her voice broke something inside me, and before I knew it, I was drawing her closer, kissing her like it was the only thing keeping me grounded. This time, the kiss wasn't hasty or desperate. It was slow and methodical, like if we were both attempting to hold on to something slipping through our fingers. When we eventually pulled apart, her forehead rested against mine, and we stood there in stillness, our breaths mingling in the short space between us. I could feel her heartbeat fast and erratic, matching mine own. "What are we doing?" I whispered, more to me than to her. "I don't know," she said softly. "But I can't stop." Neither could I. As the days went, we plunged deeper into whatever this was. The moments we spent together grew more intense, more regular, until it felt like the only time I was completely myself was when I was with her. I knew it couldn't last. I knew that something had to give eventually. But I wasn't ready to confront it yet. Then one evening, everything came crashing down. I was sitting in the living room, the TV on but muted, my thoughts far away. Jessica was upstairs and my dad was supposed to be out late again. But I wasn't paying attention to the time. I was too wrapped up in my own thoughts, thinking about everything we had done and everything we couldn't reverse. The sound of the front door opening jolted me out of my thoughts. And for a second I paused, panic building in my chest. I hadn't expected my dad to come home this early. I rushed to stand up. But before I could respond, he was already walking into the living room, his eyes sweeping the space before falling on me. "Hey," he murmured, his voice nonchalant yet laced with something I couldn't quite place. "What are you doing?" "Just watching TV," I said, my voice tense, attempting to keep the panic from showing. I could feel my heart beating, the guilt nibbling at me like a live wire. He didn't appear to notice. Or maybe he did and was choosing to ignore it. He sat down on the couch, surfing through the stations like it was just another typical night. I tried to relax myself, to tell myself that everything was great. But the weight of what we were hiding was pushing down on me, strangling me. Jessica came down the stairs a few minutes later, her face carefully neutral. She greeted my dad like nothing was wrong, like everything was completely normal. But I could see the stress in her eyes, the way her hands fidgeted at her sides. Dinner that night was terrible. The conversation was stilted. And every time my dad talked, I could feel the walls closing in. I couldn't meet Jessica's eyes. Couldn't focus on anything but the knot of anxiety tightening in my chest. I thought we may make it through the evening without incident. That maybe we'd manage to keep up the charade for one more night. But as we were clearing the table, my dad abruptly turned to me, his expression unreadable. "You've been spending a lot of time with Jessica recently," he remarked, his voice calm but inquisitive. My heart stopped. I glanced at Jessica, who had gone pale, her eyes wide with horror. I think," I muttered, trying to keep my voice calm. My dad's stare rested on me for a long period, and I could feel the air in the room shift. "Anything you want to tell me?" he questioned, his tone still casual. But there was something in it that made my blood run cold. I opened my lips to answer, but no words came out. My mind was racing, searching for something, anything that would make this all go away. But I couldn't find the words. I couldn't lie. Not while the truth was hanging in the air between us, so close to being exposed. Jessica's palm brushed my under the table. A wordless plea. But that only made the guilt greater. "No," I eventually murmured, my voice barely heard. "Nothing." My dad didn't say anything for a long time. He just gazed at me with those unreadable eyes. And in that quiet, I knew he knew too. As I stood there, the intensity of his gaze bearing down on me. I recognized that there was no evading what had already commenced. Although the words remained unarticulated, the truth persisted, lurking, and it would pursue me regardless of my efforts to evade it.